I've been staring at the notes for this deep dive for about an hour. And I have to be honest, I feel a specific kind of weight.
Hmm.
You know that feeling when you have a task that's just slightly too big for you? Like trying to run a marathon without training?
That is a very specific kind of anxiety. Yes.
Well, that is how I feel looking at this stack. Because today we aren't just talking about a book. We are talking about the book.
The doorstop.
The doorstop. The punchline for every joke about long-winded literature. We are talking about Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace.
It is the literary Everest, and your anxiety is completely justified. In fact, you're in good company.
Oh, good.
There's a statistic, and I love this because it makes me feel better about my own reading habits, that claims 2/3 of Russians have lied about reading it.
2/3. That seems high for a national treasure.
Oh.
Are they lying to look smart, or is it just that guilty feeling of, I should have done this by now?
I think it's the cultural pressure. I mean, it's ingrained in the identity, but getting through 4 volumes of French aristocrats debating philosophy while Napoleon marches on Moscow, it's a heavy lift.
Right.
Even for the home team.
Well, that actually puts me at ease. But here is the thing that really threw me when we started digging into the research. We treat this book like a sacred artifact. You whisper when you talk about it. But Tolstoy, the guy who wrote it, he didn't seem to share that reverence at all.
Not even a little bit. And this is really the best place to start if we want to take the intimidation factor down a notch. Tolstoy eventually referred to War and Peace as verbose rubbish.
Verbose rubbish. He's talking about one of the most acclaimed novels in human history. That feels a bit like false modesty, doesn't it?
It wasn't modesty, it was genuine frustration. In January 1871, so a few years after the book was published, he wrote a letter to the poet Afanasy Fet.
Okay.
And he literally said, I will never again write such verbose rubbish.
That is incredibly harsh. What was his problem with it? Did he think it was bad writing?
He thought it was trivial. By the time he was older, say around 1908, he was writing in his diary that people loved him for the wrong reasons. He wanted to be known for his religious and philosophical tracts, his ideas on nonviolence and faith, but everyone just wanted to talk about Natasha and Pierre.
It's like a musician who hates their biggest hit. Stop asking me to play Freebird.
Exactly. There's a famous story where a visitor came to his estate, Yasnaya Polyana, just gushing about the novel. And Tolstoy looked at him and said that praising him for War and Peace was like going up to Thomas Edison and saying, I really respect you because you dance the mazurka well.
That is a savage burn on himself. He thought his inventions, his philosophy were the light bulb, and the novel was just a little dance he did.
Precisely. But here's the irony. To dance that mazurka, to write that piece of rubbish, took a level of effort that is almost impossible to comprehend today.
Well, let's look at that effort.
Yeah.
Because you don't accidentally write a 1,000-page masterpiece.
No. It took 6 years of constant labor, from 1863 to 1869. And we have to remember the context.
No laptops.
No laptops, no copy-paste, no delete key. This is pen, ink, and paper. And Tolstoy was a perfectionist of the highest order. He manually rewrote the entire novel 8 times.
Wait, start to finish. 8 times.
The whole manuscript. And that's just the baseline. There were specific episodes and chapters that he reworked more than 26 times.
Wow.
He was obsessive. He would change a character's motivation or the description of a tree, and that would ripple through the whole draft, requiring massive rewrites.
That sounds like a nightmare.
Wow.
Just the physical hand cramps alone. But he didn't do this in a vacuum, right? Because when I picture a genius working by candlelight, I usually forget about the support system.
And that is a huge oversight in the Tolstoy mythology.
Yeah.
We cannot talk about War and Peace without talking about Sophia Tolstaya, his wife.
This is where the story gets complicated for me. Because on one hand, it sounds like a partnership, but on the other, the power dynamic feels a little off.
It was incredibly complex.
Yeah.
Sophia wasn't just keeping the children quiet so the genius could work. She was his literary agent, his editor, and his copyist.
So all of it.
You have to imagine her sitting there night after night, deciphering his scribbled notes, which were barely legible, and rewriting thousands of pages. She wrote in her diary, "It is impossible to count how many times I rewrote War and Peace."
Yeah, it's more than just secretarial work. If you were the one rewriting it, you were the first filter. You're the first audience.
She was the first critic. She would point out when things didn't flow or when a character didn't make sense. And she handled the business, which is another thing people get wrong about Tolstoy.
Oh.
We think of him as this ascetic sage wandering the fields, but when it came to selling this book, he was a shark.
Really? I always picture him giving his money away.
Later in life, yes. But during the War and Peace era, he knew his worth. Compare him to Dostoevsky.
Right.
Poor Dostoevsky was always in debt, gambling away his earnings, usually getting paid about 150 rubles per printing sheet. Tolstoy demanded and got 500 rubles per sheet from the Russian messenger.
Wow. So while Dostoevsky is scraping by, Tolstoy is commanding premium rates.
He was maximizing the yield. So we have this massive, expensive, labor-intensive book, and because it's such a monolith, it has attracted all these myths over the last century.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest one is right there on the cover. The title.
The peace versus world debate. I remember a teacher telling me this in high school. The idea is that war and peace is a mistranslation, right? That the Russian word for peace actually means world or society, so the book is really about war and the universe.
It is a very seductive theory. It makes the book sound even more profound. War and the world. It implies a total scope, but unfortunately we have to bust this myth.
It's not true.
It's not, but the words are the same in Russian, aren't they? Mir.
Sound the same, and today they're even spelled the same. But in the 1860s, before the Bolsheviks reformed the alphabet in 1918, they were distinct.
Okay, help me visualize this. How do you tell them apart? Think of it like the words night and night in English. They sound identical. But if I write the Dark Knight, the spelling with the K tells you I'm talking about Batman, not the time of day.
Got it. So there was a visual difference.
Exactly. Mir, meaning peace, the opposite of war, was spelled with our standard letter I. Mir, meaning world or universe, was spelled with a dotted I. All the lifetime editions of the novel used the peace spelling.
So it was always peace.
Plus, Tolstoy spoke French fluently. He always translated the title as La guerre et la paix, war and peace.
So where did the rumor come from?
Likely a typo in a 1913 edition, or confusion over a handwritten draft where the spelling looked ambiguous. But Tolstoy's intent was the contrast, war versus peace.
Speaking of translations, though, we found a gem in the research regarding the Japanese version. This might be my favorite fact of the whole deep dive.
The 1886 translation, this is absolutely fantastic.
So the translator picks up this massive Russian tome and apparently decides, you know what, this is too much.
He felt the book was cluttered. Too much philosophy, too much military strategy. He wanted to get to the emotional core.
So he just cut it all.
He just cut everything superfluous.
Which basically means he cut the war and the peace and just kept the romance.
Pretty much. He turned it into a soap opera. And the title he gave it is just poetry, he called it. Weeping Flowers and Mourning Willows, the last dust of bloody battles in Northern Europe.
Weeping Flowers and Mourning Willows. It sounds like a melodrama you'd watch at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday.
It does. But, you know, that translator was unintentionally channeling a lot of readers. There was actually an attempt in Russia in 1873 to do something similar.
Really?
Publish a version without the French text and the philosophical digressions to make it easier.
Because there is a lot of French in there. It's like 2.5% of the book, right?
Yes. Entire conversations happen in French because that's how the aristocracy spoke. But Sophia, again, the guardian of the work, eventually stepped in and reversed those edits. She understood that if you take out the difficult parts, you aren't just making it easier, you're breaking the artistic vision.
You need the philosophy to understand the romance.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that romance and the characters. Because one of the reasons this book works, despite the length, is that the people feel real. They make stupid decisions.
You feel like people we know.
Yeah, and it turns out there's a reason for that.
Right. Tolstoy wasn't just inventing these people out of thin air. He was essentially writing high society gossip. The scale is staggering. 559 characters with about 200 based on real historical figures. But the main families, they were his family.
This feels a little dangerous. Writing a best-selling novel and basing the characters on your wife and your parents.
It's incredibly bold. Take Natasha Rostova, the heroine. She's widely considered one of the most charming characters in literature.
Okay.
She is primarily modeled on Sophia, his wife.
Okay, that's a compliment.
Mostly. He used a story Sophia wrote before they were married called Natasha as a base. But then look at the Bolkonskis. The old prince, the strict, grumpy, difficult father figure. That is based on Tolstoy's grandfather, Prince Volkonsky.
No way.
And Princess Maria, who suffers under him. That's his mother.
He's airing the family laundry on a massive scale.
And he didn't sugarcoat it. That's what's fascinating. He didn't write them as idealized heroes. He wrote them as flawed, difficult people.
That's a key point. Because when you read it, you realize there aren't really good guys in the traditional sense.
No. And that confuses new readers. We expect a hero. But look at Pierre Bezukhov. He's supposed to be the moral center, the seeker of truth. But he's a mess.
A total mess.
He gives his word not to party, and 5 minutes later, he's off drinking with a bear and tying a policeman to it.
Which, to be fair, sounds like a great night out, but not very heroic.
And Natasha. We love her, but she betrays her fiancé, Prince Andrei, for Anatole Kurgan, who is a complete scoundrel. She almost ruins her life for a fling.
And Nikolai Rostov loses a fortune gambling, 43,000 rubles.
A massive sum, jeopardizing his family's future. These aren't Disney princes.
Oh.
They are human. And that's why the gossip works. He's showing us that even great people are petty, confused, and prone to mistakes.
Speaking of mistakes, even Tolstoy wasn't immune. For a guy who rewrote the book 8 times, he let a few things slip through the cracks.
He did. And critics at the time loved to pounce on them. There's the biscuit scene.
Yeah.
Tolstoy describes the Emperor Alexander I throwing biscuits from a balcony to a crowd of people. The critics screamed, "Fake news!" They said it was undignified and never happened.
Did he admit he made it up?
He tried to defend it by citing a history book by Glinka, but it turned out the detail wasn't actually in there. He likely misremembered it.
Okay.
Then there are the time warps. Characters age at different rates. Natasha is 13 in 1 year, but her sister ages 3 years in the same span.
Right.
And there's a character, Lisa Bukanskaya, who, if you actually do the math on the dates provided, is pregnant for about 15 months.
That is a very long pregnancy, even for a masterpiece.
It is. But, focusing on the biscuits and the pregnancy dates, it's kind of like pointing out a smudge on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel.
It misses the point.
It misses the point.
Yeah.
Because the real weight of the book isn't in the dates, it's in the philosophy of history.
This is where I want to slow down a bit.
Yeah.
Because this is the deep dive part, the swarm life concept.
Mm.
I feel like this is the hardest part of the book to grasp, but also the most important.
It is the intellectual engine of the novel. And to understand it, you have to look at how he wrote it. He didn't start with 1812.
Right.
He wanted to write about a Decembrist, a revolutionary returning from exile in 1856.
So he started at the end of the story.
He started in his present. But he realized he couldn't explain this man without explaining his youth in 1825. And he couldn't explain 1825 without the War of 1812. And he couldn't explain 1812 without the defeat in 1805. He kept digging backward, trying to find the root cause of why things happen.
And what was the conclusion? Because the standard history class version is Napoleon was a genius, he invaded, Alexander fought back, great men moved the chess pieces.
Tolstoy hated that idea. He called it the great man theory, and he thought it was absolute vanity. His conclusion was fatalism, or the swarm.
The swarm.
Well,
it sounds almost sci-fi.
It does. Tolstoy argued that history is not driven by the will of a single leader. Napoleon didn't invade Russia because he chose to.
Okay.
He invaded because millions of tiny unconscious coincidences and individual wills aligned to make it happen. The soldiers, the farmers, the supply chain, the weather.
But wait, hold on. If that's true, then does anyone have agency? If I decide to go to war or start a business or just eat a sandwich, am I choosing that? Or is the swarm just acting through me?
That is the terrifying question the book poses. Tolstoy suggests that the higher up you are on the ladder like Napoleon, the less freedom you actually have.
Less.
You are a slave to history. You think you are steering the ship, but you're just a cork bobbing on the waves.
So in Tolstoy's eyes, Napoleon is a fool because he thinks he's in charge.
Exactly. Napoleon is obsessed with his own greatness, his own plans, and that's why he loses. Compare him to Kutuzov, the Russian general.
Kutuzov is an odd character in the book. He's old, he falls asleep in meetings, he seems passive.
And that is his genius. Tolstoy frames Kutuzov as the ultimate hero because he understands the swarm. He knows he can't control the tide of events. He can only observe, sense the spirit of the army, and nudge things slightly.
He surrenders to it.
He surrenders to the inevitable. Napoleon fights it.
That is such a counterintuitive idea of leadership. We usually praise the person who takes charge, who has the vision. Tolstoy is saying the true leader is the one who admits they know nothing.
It's a very Taoist idea, actually. Wu-wei action through inaction. And it extends to his view on war itself. Tolstoy implies that men invent war out of boredom, fear of life, and vanity. But once it starts, no one controls it.
So why does this matter to us? Why should anyone listening to this in 2025 care about a book from the 1860s regarding a war in 1812, aside from the bragging rights at a dinner party?
It matters because of when people tend to read this book. One of our sources pointed out a fascinating trend. Readership of War and Peace spikes during times of crisis.
Yeah.
During World War II, Russians devoured it.
Because it's a survival manual.
In a way, it asks the ultimate question, will we survive as a people? Will I survive as a person when the world is falling apart?
Right.
There was an interview in our research that explicitly connected this to the current geopolitical situation.
Yeah.
It suggests that when the world feels chaotic, this book stops being a school assignment and becomes a mirror.
It reflects the chaos back at us.
And it validates it. It says, yes, the world is chaotic. Leaders are deluded, but life goes on.
I really like the quote from Paul Dano. He played Pierre in the BBC adaptation a few years back.
Yeah.
He said, the book is timeless because it captures the internal world. The costumes change. We have iPhones now instead of quills. But the anxiety, the love, the betrayal, that hasn't changed at all.
Gillian Anderson says something similar. She compared it to Shakespeare. It covers the entire spectrum of human experience.
So if we look at the ending, and we won't spoil everything, even though it's 150 years old, is the takeaway depressing? Because fatalism and swarm and war sound pretty bleak.
Surprisingly, no. And that is the magic trick of the novel. It is fundamentally optimistic. Despite the burning of Moscow, despite the death and the verbose rubbish, life wins.
Life wins.
The characters who survive and find happiness, like Pierre and Natasha, are the ones who stop trying to be great and start trying to connect. They learn to love.
Right.
Tolstoy's definition of peace isn't just the absence of shooting, it's the connection between people. It's the swarm working in harmony.
That brings me to a thought I had while reading about the swarm. And I want to get your take on this.
Okay.
If Tolstoy believed that history is moved by the collective unconscious and that great men are just riding the wave, what would he say about us today?
Oh, that is a loaded question.
Think about it. We are obsessed with the great men of technology. The Elon Musks, the Zuckerbergs, the visionary founders. We treat them like they're inventing the future by sheer force of will.
We do. We track their every tweet. We think they are steering the ship.
But if Tolstoy were here, he'd probably say they're just quarks.
He absolutely would. He would say that the tech revolution, the internet, AI, it's all the result of the swarm. It's millions of engineers, users, and historical accidents colliding. And these leaders are just the ones standing at the front of the parade pretending they organized it.
That is an incredibly humbling thought, and maybe a little relieving. It means it's not all up to them.
It puts the power back in the collective, in us.
Well, on that note, I think I'm ready to tackle the doorstop. Or at least I might stop lying about having read it.
Even watching the Bondarchuk movie counts. It's 7 hours long, but it captures the scale perfectly.
Baby steps. Thanks for helping us decode the rubbish.
My pleasure.
And thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next deep dive.